Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steve Nason, Director of Research, overseeing our entertainment research practice here at Parks Associates. And I'm thrilled today to be having a chat with Mike Green, VP of Strategic Development and Alliances at Brightcove. How are we doing today, Mike?
I'm well, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time today to discuss our industry. So, Mike, I think it would be great if you can give kind of a brief overview of Brightcove and your role there.
Sure. Now, as you said, I'm Strategic Development and Alliances here at Brightcove. I'm in our corporate development group. I've been here for about 7 years. Prior to that, running product marketing, as well as looking after our solutions for our media customer base. And for folks who want the refresh on Brightcove, since 2004, Brightcove has been helping our customers leverage the power of video across platforms. I would say that we're best known for providing a industry-leading platform called Video Cloud and a range of cloud-based modular services for the delivery and monetization of video across every device.
Awesome. Appreciate that overview. So let's jump right into our conversation. So kind of from your perspective, let's go over the last 2 or 3 years, because obviously we've had this world-changing event with COVID-19. What kind of trends have you been seeing from the industry, from your work at Brightcove, from your clients, kind of the trends that have been experienced in the video space?
Sure. Well, I think you start with consumer behavior driving a lot of the priorities for our customer base and for media companies and for content owners. And even sort of prior to COVID, certainly the overall macro trend, I would say, is just the growth in available viewing hours. And primarily that was driven first by smartphones and better connectivity for turning viewing hours to being not just something that happens at home in the evenings, but to being, during the day, live streaming sports consumed out of home on the weekend. But also, again, within the home, device proliferation has meant that every member of the family can be consuming their own personalized stream, personalized in a way that wasn't really even offered by, broadcast or cable and a legacy model. So I think for media and content owners, they think about video in terms of what is the return I can get on my investment in these rights or in this content that I've produced. And the growth overall in hours available of viewing has been the opportunity that they've been looking to take advantage of. And so they look for Brightcove to help figure out how to deliver in all those environments and how to do so with the maximum monetization possible across different business models, ad-supported, subscription, and otherwise.
And kind of branching off on that, so how have you kind of seen the impact of COVID-19? Obviously, you mentioned on the consumer side, consumption going way up, and there's been more fragmentation, more competitiveness on the industry side. So how kind of has your organization and Brightcove kind of adjusted to this new normal?
Sure. Well, our industry, in media has different types of content owners. And what we found was that, in the beginning of the pandemic, obviously a lot of our sports-based customers were retreating from being able to offer live events and, the usual array of programming, but then found a way to kind of keep fans engaged with things like archival games and other experiences. Whereas our long-form content, companies like AMC, who runs on Brightcove, found, spikes in episodic viewing. So it was always a balance during the pandemic about where the viewing was coming from. Of course, we have, enterprises, if you will, who, may look like media companies in the way that they take their brands and generate, for South by Southwest, for example, has created a OTT channel basically out of what was just a short conference. So there was a lot going on during the pandemic in terms of finding ways to keep audiences engaged and drive consumption behavior and get that ROI out of the content investment that was already there.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of touched on this in your intro, but kind of what are some of the use cases or business problems, and especially in this highly competitive market, that your clients are coming to you to help solve?
Sure. I mean, so the sort of differentiator, and it's one of the reasons why I think clients trust Brightcove, especially now with video being so mission critical, with a lot of the in-person things moving online, like live events and so forth, reliability, scalability, and security. Those are things that are applicable pretty much in every business segment that we're talking to customers in. People who need to be able to take a live sporting event and have it go from a couple 100,000 concurrent viewers to maybe a couple million towards the end of an event, where obviously on social media, you may be aware that it's highly compelling, last few minutes of a basketball game and so forth. It has to be secure. People want to ensure that none of their streams or their movie catalogs and so forth are being stolen or downloaded illegally and so forth. The Oscars obviously trust us from a security perspective. And reliability just has to do with uptime across the system. And all that kind of ties together with being able to ensure that whatever distribution points a content owner is reaching end consumers, the monetization is there, is complete, whether it again is an SVOD model or a ad-supported model. So those are the kind of problems. They sound fairly general, but they're actually a little bit more complicated and nuanced depending on the type of user experience or device array that a content owner is targeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would imagine those are critical to a lot of different organizations throughout the ecosystem. Really great perspectives, Mike. I just want to kind of wrap up, kind of spinning it forward. Where do you kind of see the video space, connected entertainment space, kind of evolving from here? Now that we kind of settled, hopefully, into this new normal, post-COVID, kind of bring ourselves out of it. Where does the industry kind of go from here?
I think so much has been focused on delivery, being able to just deliver the content to all the different endpoints. And sometimes I hear people say things like, oh, that was just the first half, was ensuring that we could get video to consumers wherever they are under any given network conditions or devices and so forth. That sounds easy, but I think there's actually still a long way to go. If you look on, obviously, Twitter or somewhere, the vitriol towards any of these services when they're having outages towards their premieres and that sort of thing, like delivery is way better than it used to be, but it's not solved. It doesn't mean that monetization is intact everywhere and so forth, or that the user experience you're able to provide on one device is successfully delivered on all the other devices in a way that becomes kind of comfortable to the end consumer. So delivery is part one. I would say, perfecting the experience in terms of using data to better inform what presentation you give a user or how you monetize a given stream, finding the right balance in terms of ad loads for somebody who's a subscriber versus who isn't. There are all sorts of things we should be doing to evolve past what we've done so far, I think, to make for a better end user experience and more successful use of our video rights and opportunity to stream.
Yeah, really well said. And that's a great way to wrap up our conversation. Unfortunately, out of time today. Really appreciate your time and perspectives today.
Thank you for having me, Steve. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
If you miss a live session, you can go back at any time to watch on demand. Go to Watch Replays and click on the session that you want to view. Have you created your own event agenda in SwapCard? Visit the Agenda and Watch Replay tabs to add sessions that interest you to your own event. You can go back to My Event to revisit any bookmarked sessions, sponsors, and items. We want to make sure that you're connecting with our industry-leading sponsors. You can interact with them by visiting the Booths in the Sponsor tab. You can also bookmark sponsors or add items to your event to view later. Sponsors have uploaded extra materials for attendees. Make sure to visit sponsors that interest you to chat with one of their team members or save documents for later. We have dedicated meeting slots set up for break times between sessions. Continue the discussion by requesting meetings from others in the SwapCard platform. Schedule a meeting with another attendee or a sponsor by visiting their page. The panelists and speakers will be addressing your questions live during the stream. During the stream, use the question tab to ask your questions early in the presentation. Go to the poll tab to answer polls that will be discussed during the live stream. If you need help navigating SwapCard, please reach out to our team by mentioning @Parks Associates in the chat box or by contacting one of our team members via our company page. Welcome to the 4th Annual Future of Video OTT, Pay TV, and Digital Media, a virtual series taking place across 2021. Consumers and their entertainment choices are the key drivers in the entertainment industry. As more video entertainment options become available, bringing more freedom of choice, consumer preferences will determine their usage patterns and the size and content of their portfolios. Market conditions have also changed the nature of competition in video services. Consumers are willing to carry multiple video accounts to get the content they want, so in many instances, a service is desired based on how it complements other services in the market. At the 4th Annual Future of Video, we are bringing together industry leaders to share insights on new trends in the video and connected entertainment industries. Our speakers will present insights on consumer behaviors and the challenges for the video industry in meeting these expectations. Parks Associates analysts will present in-depth consumer and industry research on OTT services, the value of content, and best strategies for building successful video services for today's connected consumers. We hope you can join us for these upcoming sessions or watch replays of any past sessions. On October 6th, Impact of 5G on Consumer Entertainment. Finally, join us for our 2-day conference on December 14th and 15th for the shift to hybrid business models, the age of video aggregation, capturing the consumer, video engagement and strategies, and OTT bundling partnerships. Thank you for attending Future of Video, OTT, Pay TV, and Digital Media.
Hello everyone, welcome to today's Parks Associates Future Video session, the impact of connected devices on the video experience. We'd like to take a moment to first thank our sponsors that make today's session and the Future Video series possible, our research partners Everise and Symphony Media AI, our session sponsor Delta Tray, our gold sponsors Bright Cove and Future Today, our silver sponsor BitMovin, and Metrological for sponsoring our break. Thank you all for your sponsorship. We want to also thank our supporters that make today possible as well. Our platinum supporters CEDIA, Connected Design, Dealer Scope, SCTE, the Monitoring Association, and the Z-Wave Alliance. Thank you also to our supporters, the Asia Video Industry Association and the Home Grid Forum. Thank you all for supporting Future Video. To give you a brief overview of today, I'll kick things off with my insight and view of the market. Parks Associates Director of Entertainment Research, Steve Nason, will conduct our visionary fireside chat with Michael Ribeiro of Paramount Plus, and I'll then conduct our executive Q&A portion with 3Screen Solutions, aka 3SS's, Pierre Donath, and then we'll get into a great panel discussion with Judd Bagley from Everise, Melissa De La Rama from Warner Media, Arsham Hadambeki from Universal Electronics, Lexi Nauer from Bright Cove, and Nick Lamb from Viacom CBS Streaming. From there, we'll have audience Q&A with the speakers, and then we'll invite the audience to participate in our Zoom Rooms networking discussion on the role of the device in the video user experience. Before we begin, I'd like to encourage our audience to submit your Q&A questions at any time during today's program through SwapCard. Just to briefly preview what we have in store for the rest of the year, going virtual has allowed us to break Future Video up into a steady stream of relevant topics in the video arena throughout the course of the year. As you can see, we have a lot of great topics on the horizon, and our next event is on October 6th, where we'll talk about the impact of 5G on consumer entertainment. We hope you'll join us again on October 6th and again throughout the remainder of the year. I'd like to kick things off by looking at the state of the market and to lay the background story for today's session of how significantly consumers are reliant upon connected devices, particularly smart TVs, to consume video today and how diverse that device landscape is. Our discussion panel will then dive further into the challenges and opportunities presented by delivering the streaming video experience across different connected devices. By way of introduction, I'm Paul Erickson. I'm a senior analyst with Parks Associates within our entertainment team, and I cover the consumer arena, technologies, devices, and services. And I've been in the technology arena for over 20 years, and 16 of them as an analyst, covering both the consumer and service provider ends of the video spectrum. And I'm happy to be here today with this panel to talk about two interconnected topics relevant to all of us, particularly in this last year and a half: connected devices and the video consumption experience. Let's start laying the background for today's session by looking at the state of consumer video consumption today. And what's the state of the market? Well, it's no secret that streaming video adoption is riding high, especially thanks to the pandemic. And the size of the total OTT video market has expanded in the last year or so. In Q1 of this year, almost 82% of US broadband households have at least one OTT video subscription, which represents steady growth since 2018. OTT video subscribers have now passed traditional pay TV subscribers. And OTT video is now the primary way that US consumers consume their video content. To underscore that point, let's look at the following. The market's crowded and competition is at an all-time high. As of the first quarter of this year, nearly half, 46% of US consumers have 4 or more OTT video subscriptions. Last year, it was just under half that at 22%, and consumers have clearly fully embraced streaming video, and they're using multiple services to satisfy this appetite. And eventually, there's going to be consumer fatigue from being subscribed to so many services, and the pressure is on in this crowded environment for services to find ways to increase their engagement and to differentiate their propositions in ways that go beyond simple price. Part of that indeed is content, but part of that also is user experience. And as we all know, the video watching experience can vary widely depending on the device you're watching on. So let's get an understanding of what devices and platforms the US is watching its streaming video on. When looking at how device adoption has changed over the pandemic, Parks Associates, hold on, I think I skipped ahead one there. Now we're back to the right slide. When looking at how video device adoption has changed over the pandemic, Parks Associates research evaluated what connected TV devices are actively in use within US broadband households. And as shown in the view here of a few select categories for perspective, the adoption level of most devices either remained stable or decreased slightly over this last pandemic year. And the lone exception is notable: smart TVs. And thanks to the time inside during the pandemic and consumers' increased consumption of streaming video and competitive smart TV pricing, smart TV adoption has risen over the pandemic. Smart TVs, as a result, are now in active use in 56% of US broadband households. And while smart TVs should thus be a primary part of video services and service providers' platform strategy, it's also crucial to understand that this is only part of the picture and that other devices are essential as well. Parks Associates looked at what device was used most frequently to access online video content within US broadband households. When looking at the top 2 devices, along with others for contrast, in this selected view of the research, we see that smart TVs and streaming media players are the 2 most frequently used devices for watching online video. Smart TVs are the most frequently used device in 54% of connected households, and consumers have steadily increased their preference for smart TV as their go-to device over the past several years. That said, Parks Associates dug deeper to look at the level of consumption on different devices and on what types of content. And our research found that usage-wise, the top 3 devices are streaming media players, smart TVs, and set-top boxes. And set-top boxes are the most used for service provider video, which isn't surprising. And streaming media players, not smart TVs, are the top devices for consumption overall in terms of hourly usage. And they're also the most used device for SVOD and AVOD content, and they're the top platform for watching SVOD services. Consoles and smartphones are the most used devices for watching YouTube, Twitch, and other video-focused sites. Smart TVs are the platform out of the top 3 that has the most balanced jack-of-all-trades usage, if you will, between service provider viewing, SVOD, and AVOD content. So here in this view, we can see that there are certain platforms that are more used to watch video than others, which we all basically already knew, but more importantly and relevant to today's discussion, there seem to be certain platforms that are distinctly used more for particular types of content than others. This may imply that optimizing the video consumption experiences on each might best be based on the types of content that consumers prefer to consume most on each device. And beyond the type of devices that are being used to watch video on, it's important to look at what software and operating system platforms are also being used the most. Parks Associates research found that in Q1 2021, when looking at the devices within U.S. broadband households that were the primary device to watch video on, 3 platforms comprised 65% of those devices: Roku, Samsung Tizen, and Amazon Fire TV. That said, if you look at this, the total picture is still quite diverse, and consumers are watching video on a wide variety of device platforms. And while the aforementioned players' platforms control a large piece of the market, it's clear that services and service providers need to support quite a few platforms in order to maximize their available subscriber market in this competitive market landscape. Delivering a consistent experience across this diversity of platforms is its own challenge, which we expect to touch on during our panel discussion in a few minutes. And one thing I'd like to touch on before I close is the role of the user experience. Now, the user experience can make or break user satisfaction with the overall video consumption experience on a particular device or services app. And I'd like to concentrate on a particular aspect of user experience that has been of interest in recent years as a way of underscoring where the industry's focus seems it should be in regards to this area. And that aspect is voice control. Parks Associates research in Q1 of this year found that voice control is never or extremely rarely used for control of the video experience by roughly half of respondents on the top 2 home connected TV platforms, smart TVs, and streaming media players. Streaming media players were the lowest at 54% of respondents never or rarely using voice. And from this, we can see that voice still has quite a way to go to truly be a ubiquitous part of the video consumption experience. Now, unsurprisingly, voice usage is highest on smartphones, as it's likely due to familiarity with the use of voice assistants that already exists with smartphone users. The fact that set-top box users, service provider set-top box users, have entertainment voice control usage that is slightly higher than even smartphones is telling. And while gaming consoles are not necessarily expected to be serious video consumption devices, the opposite is true for smart TVs and streaming media players. So this disparity suggests that regardless of the fortunes of the traditional pay TV industry, either their set-top boxes have a better implementation of voice control, or that sector has been more successful at making its subscribers acquainted with and comfortable with using voice control. And voice control has an important role in removing friction from the video consumption experience on connected devices, particularly for things like content search and hands-free playback initiation. So it's thus still in the interest of streaming video services and device manufacturers to work together to improve entertainment voice control and concurrently consumer comfort with voice control on these 2 significant platforms, smart TVs and streaming media players. To perhaps underscore this point, Parks Associates research examined the reasons why people were not using voice in the video consumption experience, and across all U.S. broadband households and device types, this is what we found. The top 2 reasons were that someone prefers a different control method and that their device didn't support it. And the top one being 56% said that their device, that they preferred a different control method than voice. And these were the top 2 answers, with the rest dropping off sharply from there in order. Those were: it doesn't work well, it takes too long to work, I don't watch enough video, and the apps I want to use don't support it. These results suggest that not having the feature is the main issue, and that the video ecosystem, both hardware and services, still has work to do in figuring out where voice is an appropriate part of the user experience and getting consumers on board. The other implication here, and the bigger takeaway that I want to close with, is that the industry can't rely on voice, which beyond being dependent on user familiarity and comfort, is relying upon performance factors that are variable depending on the capabilities of the hardware, whether that's things like microphone placement, latency, processor speed, and similar. Thus, the challenge and focus should be in improving the video experience in fundamental ways that are durable across multiple platforms and devices. And this is necessary for today's diverse landscape of connected devices that video is being consumed on, and less dependent on the individual capabilities of each platform, such as UX enhancements like voice control. And the user experience factors I'm speaking of, such as speed, time to content, intelligent placement of content within the interface, and similar, these are fundamental dimensions that deliver value across platforms with no effort needed on the part of the user. And I'd like to close by summarizing my look at the state of the market to help frame our discussions to follow in a few minutes. OTT video adoption is continuing steadily, and it's now the main way that US broadband households watch video. People are subscribing to more of these services than ever, and for the services, differentiation beyond price and content is increasingly important. And the user experience is one way in which these services can set themselves apart. People are consuming OTT content on a diverse spread of devices, and their consumption of certain kinds of content varies depending on the device. And there may be an opportunity there to optimize the experience based on this consumption. And now that I've given you a backdrop of the state of video consumption in the US today, and how focused on streaming video it has become, and the diversity of the landscape of devices and platforms being utilized for this purpose by consumers. Oops. Next, I'm going to hand things over to Steve Nason, Parks Associates Director of Entertainment Research, to conduct the visionary fireside chat portion of today's program. And we'll be right back.
Parks Associates' OTT Video Market Tracker Service includes a thorough analysis of market trends and profiles of nearly 300 OTT video service providers in the US and Canada. Subscription to the tracker includes comprehensive tracking of OTT video services like Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, Hulu, Disney+, HBO Max, and more. Our analysts update deliverables throughout the year, including a monthly update and quarterly subscriber and user estimates, documenting service features, key service differentiators, pricing and business models, updates on existing players, and profiles and industry implications for new services. The OTT Video Market Tracker features a new way to blend company profiles with industry research data and analysis of competing players' strengths and weaknesses in the space. To subscribe or request more information, please contact us at sales@parksassociates.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Really appreciate Paul providing that overview. That kind of sets the table for our session today on connected devices and platforms. And I'm thrilled to be leading this next portion of the program. First of all, I'm Steve Nason, Research Director here at Parks Associates. I oversee our entertainment research practice. And I'm thrilled to be doing this visionary fireside chat with Michael Ribeiro, VP of Global Marketing from Paramount Plus. Before we meet Michael and dive into our conversation, a little bit more to set the table about Michael's experience. As I mentioned, Michael is VP of Global Marketing for Paramount Plus. For those not familiar, it's a D2C OTT subscription video on demand and live streaming service from Viacom CBS that launched earlier this year. Michael supported the launch and is responsible for help driving company growth by building the Paramount Plus brand around the world. Michael is no stranger to the video marketplace. Previous to Viacom CBS, Michael is General Manager of Brand and Media at Sling TV, of course, a leader in the first vMVPD live TV streaming service, online streaming service owned by Dish Network. He was an early team member and helped grow the subscriber bases to its peak of around 2.5 million subscribers. And he oversaw the company's defining moments after launch, including new product and feature launches, as well as key advertising campaigns. And prior to Sling, Michael started his marketing career at Visa, working with key sponsorship properties like the NFL, and supporting Visa's push into the digital world with Visa Checkout. And with that, let's meet Michael and start to dive into our discussion. Michael, how are we doing today?
Hey, everyone. Thanks for that intro. I think visionary might be a little excessive. I just hope I can provide a couple good insights from my experience, both at Sling and Paramount Plus. That's helpful to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, just to kind of start our conversation and set the table properly, maybe just talk a little bit about your current role at Paramount Plus as VP of Global Marketing, and for those that maybe aren't as familiar, what Paramount Plus is all about.
Yeah. So Paramount Plus, in short, it's essentially the next evolution of CBS All Access. When CBS and Viacom came together, all of a sudden it unlocked all of this new content that wasn't available on CBS All Access. So think really big properties and networks like Nickelodeon and MTV, Comedy Central. And so with that, we relaunched the brand in March of this year. Internationally, so U.S. was our core focus, but also in other key areas like Latin America, and really, the remit for me and really the entire team is how do we build the brand and ultimately build the subscriber base. I think we've had a good first quarter, which we've announced publicly. Our earnings is coming up, which there'll be more information there. But it's been really exciting. We've got to do a lot of really cool things. Things like launching a new ad-supported, lower-priced ad-supported product, going direct to service with movies. So I just feel I felt extremely lucky to be part of all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been quite a transition, and we'll kind of get into that, the whole transition from CBS All Access to Paramount Plus, because it is kind of unique.
Yeah.
In the OTT space. But I kind of want to start, first of all, this is a reminder, as with all our sessions today, Michael will be open to taking some audience questions, and we'll carve out some time towards the end of our portion today in our chat. So please submit any questions you have for Michael in our chat or question tab there in SwapCard. So I kind of want to go back a little bit, maybe towards the beginning of the year, end of last year, as Viacom CBS was planning to migrate CBS All Access into Paramount Plus, was launched, as you mentioned, in March. What kind of trends were you internally looking at, either on the industry side, consumer side? What was kind of going on in the marketplace, and how did you kind of apply those to help form the strategy for Paramount Plus?
Yeah, for me personally, I know the sort of the dynamic in the category has been really dubbed the streaming wars.
Right.
The way I've thought about it is, to me, war implies zero sum. And I think we've gotten really comfortable knowing that consumers don't necessarily think zero sum. And it was on one of Paul's earlier slides, but this idea and really growing trend that people are building their own portfolio, essentially, building their own bundle. And I think that was important for us because we knew we didn't have to usurp someone like Netflix, that there was actually quite a bit of appetite to even add additional services. And we were very confident when we launched that within our portfolio, we offered some really compelling titles that went with Netflix really well. If you were a cord cutter out of the pay TV ecosystem, we could get you access to we can get you access to things like the NFL, which a lot of people just don't have access to if you're out of pay TV. Along with other sporting events or other live events through our live CBS feed. On the flip side, in really applying more broadly, we offered a slate, and we're going to continue to develop a slate of original titles and exclusive content that's just not found anywhere else. And so whether you're in pay TV or you're out, we feel confident that we can be a really nice complement to your existing portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, totally agree. The whole service stacking concept that Paul kind of touched on, it's definitely not, as you mentioned, a zero-sum game. There's room for competition, and obviously a lot of major players such as Viacom CBS have thrown their hat in the ring to compete. But yeah, it doesn't mean one is replacing another. It could be a complement to other services, and it's all part of kind of the consumer's video portfolio. I wanted to transition because, as we kind of mentioned off the top, this is sort of a unique situation in that Paramount Plus is basically built off the backs of an incredibly successful subscription video on demand OTT service. In fact, the first major one from a broadcaster, right, in the US, and CBS All Access, obviously a very identifiable brand. It was unique in that it combined live and on demand, as you touched on. So can you kind of talk about the transition that the company, Viacom CBS, and then specifically your group, went through as you were transitioning from CBS All Access to Paramount Plus? And also, since we're focusing on connected devices and platforms as part of the session, if the dynamic changed at all between you and your distribution partners as you were kind of making that transition.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one of the key things was going from, call it a national brand or a national company to a global brand. And we took a lot of solace in the fact that Paramount was not only widely known, but widely respected globally. I think, what our challenge is and what we continue to do every single day is how do we define for individuals that we're not Paramount Movies, that we're not Paramount Network, that we're Paramount Plus and we're a streaming service. So I think, from a messaging and a communication standpoint, that's one of our main challenges. What we see sort of helping buoy that is, as I mentioned earlier, just our slate of originals and how compelling we're sort of taking. I think the mix is really, twofold. We're taking really well-known franchises, stuff that people love. I'd point to maybe iCarly as an example, known and loved. It actually was even on Netflix and kind of has this just rabid base. And now when we launched the rework of that series, all of a sudden, we're able to tap into that existing base. At the same time, we're developing net new titles. We've announced a bunch and more will be coming. So that combination, I think, has really helped us. In terms of partner, like how does it work with partnership? I think it's actually strengthened our partnerships, really in the sense, we were talking a little bit yesterday about there's sort of two different relationships with partners. One is on a kind of editorial side, the other is on a paid media side. And on the editorial side, when you're able to tap into things that resonate with culture, that resonate with viewers, I'll go back to the iCarly example. All of a sudden, partners want to lean in even harder because they know, hey, that's going to drive viewership and usage of their device. And so that's been really interesting to see. We've had a lot of really good partners with all the sort of standard players in the industry. But I'd say the partners definitely sort of jump towards what's going to make an impact, what's going to drive usage. And so when you're able to say, hey, look, we have an established title, or we have this brand new original that we think is going to be so great. They're really supportive in that dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple of reminders. I already see a couple of questions filter in that we will certainly get to, as many as possible. Also, we have some poll questions for you to answer, and we'll get to those results later on during our panel discussion. So, Michael, I kind of wanted to shift gears. You're obviously oversee global marketing, right? And as you mentioned, not off the top, Viacom, CBS, Paramount, they're international brands. You guys are in several different international markets. So I'd love to get your more global perspective on kind of how you guys see the consumer electronic device and platform market. Obviously, as Paul mentioned, in the U.S., it's dominated by the Samsungs and Amazons and Rokus and some of the other smart TV folks. So how do you kind of look at it? Is it all similar landscape in your perspective, and your strategies are similar, or do they differ by market? And how do you kind of look at all that?
Yeah, differ quite greatly. And I think I think the thing we say internally is just being flexible and really trying to follow the consumer. I think we look at it in one sense. We haven't really had to evangelize streaming in a lot of places. The Netflixes and the Disneys have done that. So they've laid a path that we can go and walk. And I think we go and do that again, meeting where people already are and really trying to convince them more, hey, this is why we're going to be a great addition to your existing streaming portfolio. And, as the macro trends of, people in non-US countries, they get more comfortable with sort of stacking as is happening in the US. We see that just as a boon for business. What I would say is, we're also, given sort of the global nature of Viacom CBS, even before streaming, there are a lot of the relationships existed. And so we've really, I think used that to our benefit in two different ways. So one, using MVPDs, using aggregators, using other players in the video ecosystem as a point of distribution in other countries. A good example, or parallel to the US would be with Comcast and being on the Flexbox, something like that. But then again, I'd go back to, we have these established franchises, content franchises that people are hungry for and asking for. So whether it's at times it's like, I don't care what we hear it. I don't care what device you're on. Just get me the content. I want it in my country. And so that makes a lot of our decisioning just a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt. You mentioned aggregators, so that's a great segue to my next question. I want to dive a little deeper into that relationship with aggregators, and more specifically, kind of aggregation services. So obviously, there's all different types of aggregators. You mentioned the Flexbox. We have pay TV providers that are aggregators. You have device manufacturers. You have MVPDs and MVPDs that aggregate content and allow access to different kind of subscription OTT services and other types of services. But there's kind of been in the industry this push and pull between aggregators and some of the leading services, including Paramount Plus. There's been some very public spats, if you want to say, or disagreements on like with Amazon and Roku and with Peacock and HBO Max as examples about being available on these aggregation platforms like Prime Video channels, Apple TV channels. For those who don't know, CBS All Access was one of the leaders and leading services on a lot of those aggregation services, and that continues with Paramount Plus. So how do you kind of look at that relationship with these aggregation type platforms? What are some of the advantages of being on an aggregation platform? Maybe some of the challenges that exist. We'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I would say at the end of the day, we've sort of stated publicly we're a content company. So getting into the last mile of delivery, we've got to learn how to play nice in the sandbox, just because that's a key part of the ecosystem that, as of right now, we just don't have capabilities. It was a little bit different when I was at Sling. We actually developed our own hardware, given some of the experience with Dish. So that was a little different. But I think at the end of the day, it's a bit of a frenemy relationship. On one hand, and I think you see parallels like with games and what's going on with some of the antitrust suits, with the very app stores. But I think we're leaning into it. At least here in the US, we're part of Amazon channels, we're part of Apple channels. So we see value in working closely with these partners. They help drive our business, and I think we return. I would say just from an SVOD standpoint, and why you see a lot of these spats, and I think is really it comes down to two dimensions, and this is stuff we're wrestling with every single day. So I don't have a great answer, but I can at least tell you the thought process. Sure. So first of all is who owns the customer? Do you own that billing relationship? Are you able to communicate with that individual through email, through push notification, et cetera? And the second is economics. Clearly, to give perspective, when I was at Sling, the economic profile is a little bit different than at Paramount Plus, and so we took a harder stance with distributors. To the point we sort of had this backup in. We were developing our own hardware as well. So we felt, hey, if things went nuclear, we wouldn't be out of luck completely. That we had, but I think at the same time, you sort of, if you're not on a certain platform, or if a certain platform doesn't have, someone like a Disney Plus who has hundreds of millions of subscribers, that's a very, that's a gaping hole, and likely to drive, purchase and preference to other players. So it's very much a delicate dance that we are walking. I think what even further complicates this is as hardware providers start to develop their own content. And when we go into, more sophisticated use cases like universal search, I want to, find X, Y, or Z that's maybe carried on multiple services. Who's going to be shown first? How am I, what's going to be, shown? Like if it's on Amazon Prime, is that going to be the default? So I think, again, a delicate dance. And I think, attention is healthy and kind of, parallels in a lot of different industries. But at the end of the day, I think we want to be where consumers are, and clearly these device manufacturers want people on their service. So I think it's a healthy relationship.
Yeah, well said. That's a great perspective. Appreciate that. I'm going to jump to an audience question, if that's okay, Michael. Really interested in getting your perspective on this. You mentioned at the top, and many are familiar, that Paramount Plus has a couple of different paid tiers based on with or without advertising. Some of the other services in the market have done that as well with a hybrid kind of approach, either with or without advertising. Some have free tiers. And then paid tiers that folks can upgrade to for additional content or lack of ads and so forth. So the question is, do you see the possibility of any consumer confusion when trying to present these different tiers from the same service? And how do you kind of handle that in your marketing and brand efforts?
Yeah, I think we struggle with that all the time. Will someone take the time first to learn even that you're a streaming service, and then second, when you start to get in the nuances of different product types, I think we try to alleviate that in a number of different ways. So at least at Viacom CBS, so our free offering, our fast offering is Pluto TV, so completely different brand name. I think that helps, but as we get into our pay lane, which is Paramount Plus, which has two different. It's really on our marketing teams, on our product teams to make it as easy and sort of straightforward as possible. One, through the sign up flow, I'd say that's probably the most critical, is getting someone into the right product or service initially. But then, when I was at Sling, we experimented quite a bit with something we called contextual upsell. So within the app, we could merchandise features or programming that wasn't available in your existing service, and ideally seamlessly make it. If you wanted to add, say, an add-on package, sports or entertainment, you could quickly do that with a click of the button. If you wanted more DVR space, you could do that. So I think what we looked for is what were those critical junction points where there might be a point of confusion. Try to be as clear as possible there, but knowing even sort of the most clear text or video that a lot of times consumers just aren't paying attention. Trying to build it into the various flows and making it as easy for them in order to get what they wanted if they weren't in the correct plan or package from the outset.
Yeah, really interesting. Really, really interesting. Looks like one of our audience members has kind of read my mind because they're having a question about user experience. So we're going to touch on that as I kind of ask my own question about user experience. So obviously that's huge. Paul mentioned it. And now that we're talking in the context of connected devices and platforms, user experience, how folks find content. You already mentioned kind of content discovery and how complex that is. The navigation of the interface and all that. So how do you at Paramount Plus kind of adjust and calibrate the user experience based on the different devices? Because obviously an experience watching directly through a smart TV versus a gaming console versus a mobile device, smartphone or tablet is going to be different, right, for that end user. So how do you kind of calibrate? How do you market maybe differently the user experience based on different devices? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I think inherent is, first of all, asking and listening to the consumer, and doing it both quantitatively and qualitatively. Of course, like any online service, you get a ton of metrics. I think, where we have seen success is adding a story to those metrics, and actually talking to people. Tell us what frustrates you. Tell us what you would like to do. So I think that starts, and then kind of just an inherent hypothesis testing type of methodology. Again, all pretty standard stuff which I think a lot of different streamers are doing. I think one idea which has come up is really how it relates to the mobile phone. The mobile phone I think is really interesting, and I did some previous research at Sling, and we've uncovered insights like people like to listen to the news in their car on their morning commute. They want to listen to CNN or Fox News instead of listening to the radio. So, we thought about how do we take some of those little nuggets really on the end of use cases and start to, quote unquote, productize those. And so that's been interesting. But, I think it's again, starts and ends with the consumer. Things that we found is just, when you're watching on a bigger screen, it's typically, laid back and, longer viewing experiences. On a mobile, it's typically shorter. And, I'm just trying to fill the time while I'm doing something. And sometimes I might be watching two things at the same time. So just trying to be really in tune with the consumer and knowing kind of the use of the individual platform, and then taking a test approach to, you know, are we doing the right things in order to see people watching longer, watching more frequently, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about, when we had our pre-chat before our discussion today, we talked about the use of voice, and Paul mentioned that in his intro today, talking about the importance of voice and how it's kind of evolving. So maybe just touch on that and how the use of voice and how you guys kind of fold that into your strategy. Obviously, it helps with, you know, content discovery and the whole navigation of the UI and finding something that the folks want to watch. So can you talk a little bit maybe about the use of voice?
Yeah, you know, anecdotally, I'd say, you know, again, if we start with the consumer, I've sort of seen like the quote unquote power outlier users, and you sort of take note of that. And I'm referencing specifically, I have 70-year-old in-laws and I have a 7-year-old at home, and seeing the way that they interact with a streaming device, you see how important voice is. It's easy. I don't have to read. I don't have to. I can look at the pictures after I've gotten to the place that I've gone, and so you start to see the potential future. And also, when you have other connected devices in your house, you could see how integrated it can really be. But I would say, you know, similar to where streaming was, you know, probably 5 years ago, if you can't get the basics right and it just works, we're going to be in trouble. And, you know, I think it's, you know, Paul mentioned availability is huge. You know, second, like actually working every single time. Do they understand what you're saying, or do they not? And you know, maybe the mobile phone is ahead of that versus more of a lean back experience. So that's how we think about, you know, I would say, you know, again, in just following the consumer, you know, a lot of times as people are still very comfortable flipping around. I think you know, what we're thinking about really from a content discovery standpoint is we're starting to put so much content into Paramount Plus, and there was so much content in Sling. Is how do we get people to video as fast as possible? And you know, that could be, you know, again, thinking about it from a franchise perspective, or you know, this is what's new. But then also making some of those connections that, you know, hey, you watch, you know, X, Y, or Z, you might like A, B, or C, and so trying to make maybe some of those less linear connections. And, you know, we work with a variety of partners in our internal teams to do a lot of that work. So, you know, interesting stuff. And, you know, definitely I think where the future is going. So I think you guys are spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we actually only have a couple minutes left. Time has flown by. This conversation has been fantastic. I kind of just want to spin it forward. You're going to look into your crystal ball now, Michael, and predict the next 1 or 2 years of kind of the trends that you guys with Viacom CBS are going to be focusing on, how it's going to kind of help the strategy for Paramount Plus. What do you kind of see, maybe both on the industry side and the consumer side, as it relates to video, and how it's going to help form your strategy moving forward?
Yeah, so I'd go back maybe to my first comment. I think it's inherent is just with the service stacking, at what point do we reach the point of no return? And maybe we're not there yet or anywhere near there yet, but do you start to see more you know, more partnerships, even acquisitions as media companies look to bulk up more? I think voice is going to be critical, and really, I think what does the voice journey look like, especially when you have you know, people who offer voice, where they're vertically integrated and producing their own content. You know, what kind of keeps me up at night is if, you know, you're on Amazon and someone says, I want to watch the NFL, and, you know, NFL on Amazon is the first thing they see, versus maybe it's Sunday morning and you're in Miami or Denver, and you want to watch your local CBS game. Is it going to be more difficult to sort of uncover something like Paramount Plus? So, you know, those two, I do think there's probably going to be a bit of an aggregator war. Maybe that's the more appropriate moniker, as opposed to the streaming war, where we can coexist more peacefully. But you can sort of see how on a piece of hardware, especially as smart TVs kind of come up in more and more prevalence, maybe start to get more processing power and give a better viewer experience. That are they the new kid on the block that's gonna, you know, fight where, you know, you can only have really one media streaming player in your living room or in your bedroom, where some of that may be more zero sum. So those are at least the things that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, really, really interesting perspectives, and a great way to wrap up our discussion here and kind of segue into the next portion of our session. Michael Romero, VP Global Marketing from Paramount Plus. Really appreciate your time today and your perspectives. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great. All right. Well, fantastic discussion there with Michael. Up next, Paul will take the virtual stage to do an executive spotlight with 3Screen Solutions, and we'll be right back. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve and Michael, for that view from the Paramount Plus perspective. And I'm honored to now have our executive spotlight portion of today's session from 3Screen Solutions. I'd like to present Pierre Donat, who's the Chief Product Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of 3SS. Pierre first joined 3SS over 10 years ago and today is responsible for product development and marketing strategy and communications for the company. He spearheaded the creation of the company's acclaimed 3Ready solution and devises 3SS's ongoing product framework, drawing upon his knowledge of Android TV and multi-screen platforms. He holds a master's degree in media and communications management from the University of Applied Sciences in Offenburg, Germany, and is an SAFE certified product owner and product manager. Pierre, we're thankful to have you today here to give us a 3SS perspective on some of the topics that we're discussing related to connected devices and the video experience. And Pierre, to help give the audience a bit of perspective and to set the framework here on 3SS and our discussion, would you be able to briefly tell us a bit about yourself, 3SS, and what the company does and how the company's products and services fit into the wider video services ecosystem?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And first of all, thanks for the invitation to be here today. I think for the people who don't know us yet, 3SS, we are focused on supporting broadcasters and operators mainly to deliver a really seamless experience across all screens, no matter if it's your own set-top box that you have in the market, smart TV apps, web, mobile, any device and screen you can deliver your solution or service on. And we are very focused to provide the value to our customers by bringing the best user experience from a front-end perspective and launch all these solutions very fast but then work with the customers very, very closely to continue to innovate on the service, because today you expect not a product to end when it's launched. Actually, it's just started to further develop. I think we are based right now. Our headquarters in Stuttgart, in Germany. We have 6 offices worldwide, and from a customer perspective, we have customers in North America, South America, but I think mainly our operators customers are right now in Europe.
Perfect. Well, Pierre, let me kick things off by asking this question. You mentioned service providers, and many service providers, if they haven't embraced it already, they're faced with the reality today of needing to adapt to a mixed platform video consumption landscape. The traditional set-top box is no longer, the main way that individuals consume pay TV content. And today, it's only one platform within a varied menu of devices that consumers are consuming their video on, in and out of the home, with smart TVs being the most prominent at-home device. How can service providers today look to adapt to the landscape that's out there now of connected devices? How do they adapt to this and deliver their experience beyond the set-top box, right? Especially in this competitive environment where time is crucial. What are best practices here from the 3SS point of view?
Yeah, so we always try to look from the user's perspective, and I think what's the problem right now, or what is the challenge, is that people expect your service to be available everywhere the user is. So if you have different devices in your home, no matter if it's your smart TVs, or phones or tablets, if you pay for something monthly, then you need to be there. So back in the day, I think it was okay to have, let's say, an operator set-top box only, and that was the primary device you have been using. But I think today the expectation is that if you pay for something, it has to work on any device that you already have, plus maybe the prime experience on the set-top box. So we work today, I think, with most of the operators still to provide like a really prime experience with their own custom device, because they have full control, they can aggregate, they can monetize freely. But just this year, we're going to launch with 7 of our operator customers smart TV experiences, including live TV, VOD, and all the services, to make sure if you have another TV, let's say in your bedroom or in your kid's room, that you can also use there the service if you already pay for. But operators also embracing now the opportunity to reach new target audiences that even don't have a subscription yet. Or not a device yet from the operator. So just by downloading the operator app, trying it out, and then actually onboarding these users from inside the smart TV applications. And I think, yeah, unfortunately, the challenge is still to be everywhere in a very efficient way. And I think here is where 3SS comes in. We provide not only a great and unified experience, which we have won awards for the last 3 years for best of user experience, but it's also that we are able to launch fast on all of the devices and then make it easy to maintain and manage these devices remotely.
Thank you. And I think that the company is again in a good position, especially for the challenges that service providers face today, particularly because there's only so many ways that infrastructure can be expanded, whether that's satellites or cable in the ground or what have you. And if you think about what it takes CapEx wise and development time wise to bring forth a set-top box, when there's so many connected devices out there today, being able to leverage all of those devices, it's an incredible appeal to operators looking to expand their available subscriber base without the time and CapEx that it takes to via the traditional methods to grow their infrastructure, to deploy set-top boxes and all the pieces that come with it. So certainly I think it's the right position to be a connector or enabler to allow them to leverage that diversity of devices that's video capable in today's consumer landscape. My next question I have for you is that given the growing volume and variety of content providers out there and the growth of this concept of super aggregation, I mean, what's your opinion on how these two trends affect the video experience going forward? And as a means of kind of spurring this question, to me, these are placing even more pressure on the user experience. And yes, of course, it's great if you can have personalization of a gigantic amount of content, across multiple services. But I think the challenge here is getting past overload, right? So how do you surface all of this content usefully and contextually in front of the consumer in this idealized, super aggregated user experience? Moreover, how do you do this well across so many different platforms, right? Set-top box, smart TV, mobile, and so on.
Yeah. I mean, let's start from the beginning. I think when TV was launched, there were also not hundreds of channels, and it was not really complex to find what to watch, because you just zapped through 3 or 4 channels and you were able to see what's available. And I think over time, we had so many more channels coming in. The EPG was developed as one solution to discover that. But where we are today is actually that with all this direct-to-consumer trend, you have actually what some people call the app diving experience. So you have all the different applications, which are all the content providers or broadcaster brands, and you actually have to dive into their experience to discover the content that might be interested for you. And it sometimes feels for some of the people like the new channel zapping. It's just that you zap through the app and you actually have to always see a new experience because Disney Plus looks different than Netflix or other services. And it's actually getting more complex. So the effect of this trend is actually more complexity for the user, and it's again not easy to use. And I think the way we are trying to solve it together with our partners and customers is that we want to get away again from this app-centric discovery to an interest-centric discovery. And I'm not saying now you just have to throw Netflix content next to Disney Plus and package that. No, it's actually more about if now the Olympia is happening and you start your TV service, I think people expect that there is an Olympia section where they simply can find all content around Olympia that is available on this TV right now. No matter if it's highlights that are only available on YouTube, highlights that are only available through my subscription that I pay for, or it's a documentary content from other sources that are around Olympia or sports. And I think if you aggregate all content on one platform, then the next step is to make sure you curate it in a way that you reach the audiences who are really interested in these things. And I think back then you created channels and let's say themes or genres, which are very generic still. But in the future, we see, let's call it sections or playlists or channels around windsurfing or specific interests in this or that area. And it all comes down to first, technically make everything available in one place, and then B, and that's what we provide, is a tool so you can curate the content from multiple sources in one section and then make it easy for the user to discover everything from one place around his interest and not to select first in which app or which experience I want to dive. And before I get some, let's say, trouble from our friends from the broadcast or content owner side, I think we're not trying now to put everybody in one bucket, but I think there must be a better experience for the users than always diving into the app experience, finding the content. And I think that's what we're trying to enable. And also the Samsung or other smart TV platforms are trying to get there. From a pure feature perspective, if you have not only one device, let's say you have like our operators or other customers, your Prime set-top box, smart TV apps on any device, you have a Roku app, Apple TV, Fire TV, PlayStation app, web and mobile, then I think to have a seamless experience, there are only 2 features very important. One is cross-synced watch list. So if I add something that I want to watch next or later, this should be synced. And if I stopped something watching on one device, I want to continue on the other. And I think this is already a lot of complexity for the systems and players in the market today. But after that comes, of course, all what you can do with data about contextual personalization. You can add voice capabilities and so on. But I think watch list and continue watching capabilities, I think, is the start to have a seamless experience.
Good, and thanks for that, because I was personally wondering, what are the durable parts of the experience that you can realistically transport from platform to platform, right? Especially dealing with all the complexities of that, and certainly those personalized individual elements are very appropriate. And I think you bring up a few good points there, in that the challenge there today isn't availability of content or availability of services to deliver that content. In a way, I would say the viewer is challenged to find the content that they want within the limited amount of viewing time that they have every day. Whether they're grabbing it in a 2-hour chunk or it's in passing, it's a 30-minute chunk. So anytime that you can cut down that friction in getting to what they want or seeing only the types of content that they want, it's a win for the viewer. Aggregation and super aggregation now, I think, as you mentioned, we see this everywhere. And whether it's taking place at a platform level from players such as, let's say, Roku, Amazon, and Google, or it's taking place at a device level for the companies that have ownership of that, for example, Samsung. You see everyone trying to get better at bringing together content in one place in a contextual way. And I think that it isn't a question of whether it's possible to put all that content in one place. I think it's more if you want to, it's a bit cliche. The magic of it, or the special part of it, will be in doing it in a way that is most relevant to the consumer, that is most efficient to the consumer, and that encourages the consumer to consume, right? To see the videos that they want to see and to click on them. And I think that there's a lot of room there for 3SS and others to add their special sauce or their magic, or that intangible part, the knowledge, the contextualization, to the mix. And so certainly I think super aggregation is going to be a word. We may get tired of it, but I think it's going to be the subject of the day increasingly over these next couple of years. And for my next question, I was wondering, many parties, particularly service providers, they're faced with an audience that now consumes on multiple platforms. And you maybe alluded to it before, but what are the biggest challenges to overcome when it comes to delivering a streaming, or basically a streaming OTT services content or traditional pay TV's content experience across a variety of devices? And how does 3SS help service providers get over this hurdle?
So, I mean, if you are now on the service operator side, you actually have 3 areas of challenges. One is the content side, so having the rights to distribute the content or to monetize on all the different platforms. I think this is already quite a challenge in some areas. Then you have the technology complexity. So when you really want to be everywhere, you have to invest in developing your own applications for Android TV, Samsung Tizen, LG WebOS, PlayStation, Roku, Fire TV. And I think you can, of course, do everything in-house, but doing this at scale and being up to date with all the individual evolutions of the ecosystems around Samsung, Android, iOS, Apple, is quite complex. And I think here is what we are providing the solution for. So we have a framework which allows you to launch fast an experience on all devices that is unified. And then we support you to keep these apps not only working or updated when also the platform gets an update. We also work with our customers together on the roadmap to always continue to leverage the latest platform APIs, for example, to surface content from inside your app already outside. So when you focus on a smart TV already in app, you probably see app recommendations and all of that, what the platform provider provides. And I think this is where we are up to date and we can scale, because we don't do it just once. We do it actually multiple times for many of our customers. And the third challenge after, I think, the technology, where you have to develop all these apps and all the different technologies, is the experience. And I think here we have done, I think, our part in the last 12 years to create experience that is not only using the platform-specific benefits, but you can really go from the set-top box to the smart TV app or to the desktop app, and it feels like you have used it before. So it's intuitive. And if you look at good working applications and good experiences, you think, okay, why is this so complex? But this is exactly what we are trying to do always, is to make that magic. So you don't feel anything about the technical complexity, to make this seamless, high performant, and have the best streaming quality, of course, on top. But I think what we bring to the table is, again, time to market, to launch fast on all of the devices, and then really be in control of your own roadmap, to add new features and innovate based on your user feedback, but part of an ecosystem where we also have a roadmap and we are evolving. So when we have developed something as part of the framework, you can easily launch these new features without building them from scratch for your own service. And I think this is where time to market after the launch is still key, to keep innovating and deliver updates to your users.
And I think that's important, especially in this market landscape where traditional pay TV and pay TV service providers, they're challenged, right, by the transitions that are taking place in the market and people consuming so much OTT video. They're challenged in moving beyond their traditional way of delivering video, and in how to deliver to all of these different connected devices, and to meld that experience with OTT streaming services as well. And I think the time to market is a very, very tangible issue for them to solve, because these aren't the days of old where pay TV operators could afford, either time-wise or capex-wise, to maintain development teams, right, or to develop their own platforms, or to take a year and a half to bring out a set-top box and what have you. That luxury, or those luxuries, are not there anymore. So I think time to market is definitely a issue that is top of mind for many operators looking to take advantage of the current consumer climate. And certainly, when they sign on to a platform, they sign on with a vendor that is in control of that destiny, look and feel wise. Yeah, it's a tangible concern as well. What are they signed on to? Is there room to expand in the future? If they want to add functionality, that flexibility has to be there. So I think
this is maybe something, Paul, I would like to add about flexibility. So yes. I wasn't really clear on the framework. So it's a framework because it opens up this flexibility. We have a reference experience that was built over many years, what we saw as best practice working with our customers, but also looking at the most popular OTT apps. We don't have to mention them. And I think this combined is our reference experience, something you can go with, and you can be sure this is working nicely, and you have a very good, I think, NPS score also from a pure user experience. But we offer that you can also, based on the foundation, just technically bring your own UX, or even after the launch, completely divert. No matter what you want to look like or want to be unique as your brand, to reflect that. So we are very flexible, but actually from our customer base, I would say the half or 50% are staying close to the framework and then using more the remote configuration ways to differentiate or be unique. Not everybody wants to always, let's say, do everything end to end by themselves.
Right, and I think that's also important. You brought up the capability to differentiate, right? To have something different, to be flexible in the user experience. And although we won't get into Android TV, certainly that was a reason for the rise of operator tier, and why that became so popular is the ability to customize elements of the user experience. So certainly I think that addresses the concerns of a lot of service operators or service providers, where they don't want to have a genericized experience. They want to have something that is branded and unique to themselves, no matter what platform it's on. And certainly if there's a framework that allows them to keep that individuality, I think it speaks very well to their concerns. And speaking of service providers, my next question alludes to that. From the 3SS perspective, can you provide some contrast to the roles of a device manufacturer versus a video service provider, and how they play into the mix?
Yeah, so I think a device manufacturer, originally from the past, made also, or is still making money with the hardware itself. And if you look at, for example, a Samsung or an LG or also an Android TV OEM who's using Android TV as a platform, I think they are more like platform builders or providers where other can deliver their services on. We've seen that some of the providers or some of the OEMs go directly also and offer TV services and other services. But most of the time, I think the OEMs have understood they cannot just build the hardware and try to sell it. They also have to get into the experience game and differentiate how the experience on the TV is. So that's why they are there. And some of them are experienced now a little bit also how much they can actually also offer services from being already, when you buy a TV, being basically direct to consumer. But they still see themselves also as platform providers because they know they cannot build the best experience for everyone in the world in every country and have all this, let's say, you named it, personalization or relevant content for niche markets delivered and curated for this. And I think this is where the service providers come in. They are the experts when it comes to local content, when it comes to what is relevant for this target customers. And this is, I think, also where the operators are still extremely important and relevant. They actually package everything that is there in a certain, so let's say territory or a country. And they not only provide you the TV service, but also the infrastructure. And then they often also make sure that for your money, you get everything that is relevant for you in this market. And this local expertise and local focus, an OEM is struggling with. So I think there's always the split between OEM building the platform to have services that they can deliver based on that, and the service providers really try to use the platform and leverage everything that is there to monetize and deliver the best possible user experience for that individual market.
Okay, thanks for providing that contrast. And I want to touch on one thing very quick before I get to a audience question for you that I hope to do within our time limit here. And I had mentioned voice before. And so I wanted to very quickly get it out of the way because we see so much about voice today, you know, whether it's smart speakers or people searching content with their voice or controlling their home with their voice. And so since consumer interest in voice control continues to rise, particularly when it comes to the connected home or smart home entertainment experience, you know, as I mentioned before, there's still significant progress to be made when it comes to getting consumers comfortable with using voice when it comes to searching for content, initiating playback of content, controlling the entertainment experience. In your view, what can be done to make voice control a better and more valuable part of the video experience for consumers?
So I think there's the trend of everybody having now these smart devices more and more in their living room or in the living space. And I think what is currently mainly the issue is that it either is too complex to connect your services to enable this on your speakers or already hardware that you have, or the people have it even connected, but they don't know how to use it. So there is no really good education. What are smart commands or use cases you can have that are actually better than using the native control, which is the remote control or your finger using your phone or the mouse for the desktop. So I think we're going to see that all of the existing devices that you already have, no matter if you have Alexa, Siri, or Google Assistant, they will much better communicate with all of the video apps. And the apps, they will become like hybrid. So you can navigate them through the existing interface that they have. So maybe the remote, or again, your finger or your mouse. But everything you do inside will also be able to be triggered using a voice action or voice command. And then I think this is just about time then to educate people what are the use cases where you actually really save time. So one example is if you channel switch, I'm sure it's still fast. You just press one button on the remote versus telling your smart speaker to switch the channel one channel up. But if you want to go to a specific game that you know is currently playing, it might be better just you say something like game time or play my favorite soccer club. And then it's just launches your TV and it starts right there. So I think it's about first making it much easier to connect your existing devices with the apps, using, of course, all the far field and existing assistants you already have, and then educate the people better what you can do with it, and focus only on the use cases that actually save you time. So I give you one last example, and then I'm done. I think if you talk about smart TV, it's already such a great display, and if you go today and you want to book a flight, you have to use your laptop or even your phone, and you go to a website, you have to type in the day, you have to search for the time of the flight, how many people, and so on. And if you could just say, hey, I need a flight to Barcelona tomorrow evening, and then on the screen, I see all my options directly, and say I book flight number 1 or 2, and it's done. I think this is how we save time. This is where we add also this acceptance to voice, because this is really much faster than doing it with the tools we have today without our voice.
Right. I think certainly that we've all experienced that friction where whether voice is being applied in the right way in the user experience is always a question sometimes, whether it's the most efficient way to accomplish a task, like the volume or changing channels. But I think there's a lot of other ways in which it can enhance the experience of at least taking advantage of that screen, like you mentioned. And there's certainly a big task ahead, or a continuing task for the ecosystem, just in the natural language recognition itself, right? Understanding context, understanding deeper meaning, understanding it across accents, right? So there's some challenges to solve in the underlying technology, and I think you call out well at least the challenges that can be worked on from just the entertainment ecosystem, which is understanding where voice is an appropriate enhancement to the entertainment experience, right? Where it actually adds value, and concentrating deeply on that. So forgive me, I'm going to cut very quick to an audience question because I think it's a good one before we get into our panel. But Pierre, what is your reaction to this? So we have a question here that says, since genuine smart TVs, such as TCL with Roku, what have you, are growing in popularity, does that present user experience challenges since smart TVs have longer life cycles that can inhibit the latest and greatest generation of software, such as on older smart TVs? I guess the question is really about longer replacement cycles and update cycles. How to solve those issues.
How to solve it?
User experience challenges.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
So just from our perspective, I can tell you we worked on smart TVs that were very old. I think first, or even not, was Samsung Blu-ray players back in 2011 or something like this. And every year you had to develop a new application so you were able to run it on the upcoming platform. And they all learned that if they want to build an ecosystem, they have to keep their apps supported. So just from a pure ecosystem perspective, all of the OEMs and upcoming TV sets, they make sure everything what is there before is supported, just simply because of their development community and partners. And I think, of course, there are new requirements coming like 4K, 8K, HDR, which are rather like also limited to the hardware. But I think it's not a challenge that I see coming to the experience if now the cycles get longer. Because what I see very often is you buy a smart TV right now, it's great, it works amazing with all the apps. Of course, depends also how much money you spend. And if it doesn't give you any more updates, maybe Samsung or others, they just deprecate this version because they don't deliver any update yet anymore, because it's just too much cost to justify, to maintain. Then what you do, you buy probably still a stick from the retail market or another device that you can plug in that has more power and where you have the latest experience, or you really get it already from the operator, like we discussed before. Maybe it's an Android TV smart speaker hooked up to your TV, and that is already the best experience then on the existing smart TV. So I think there's an easy way now to upgrade if your smart TV runs out of time.
Yeah, I agree. And we see so much competition in that streaming media player space, especially when it comes to affordability, right? So it's no longer this monolithic purchase every 10 years of a TV. If you get frustrated with that experience, usually it's a very small expenditure to suddenly upgrade it, right, to the latest and greatest. So with that, Pierre, I'm going to have to call it for time, but thank you very much for joining us and giving us a lot of valuable insight and perspective into the intersection of devices and user experiences from the 3SS perspective. And I look forward to hopefully chatting with you later in our networking discussion after the conclusion of the panel. Thank you again.
Thanks, Paul.
Oops. And now, without further ado, I'd like to move to our panel discussion, and I'm honored to present our group of panelists today. We're joined by Judd Bagley from Everise, Melissa De La Rama from Warner Media, Arsham Hanabeki from Universal Electronics, Lexi Nauer from Bright Cove, and Nick Lamb from Viacom CBS. And I'll be moderating today's panel. Welcome, everyone. We're happy to have you here for this discussion, and thank you again for joining us for what should be an interesting talk. And I'd like to encourage our audience to submit your Q&A questions to the panel through SwapCard as they come up while we're speaking, and we'll address them immediately after during our Q&A portion. And before we start, we'd like to have each of our panelists introduce themselves and tell us a bit about themselves and what they do in each of their roles at their companies. First up, we have Judd Bagley, who is the Vice President of Marketing at Everise. Judd, tell us a bit about yourself and what you do at Everise.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Vice President of Marketing. I kind of started my career in journalism, and then that turned into public relations, and now it's marketing. But I always kind of approach this job through the lens of how to tell compelling stories. And Everise is a company that has a lot of those, so it's been exciting to be here. We focus on we provide outsourced customer support to companies, in particular companies in the connected device space, and we do quite a bit of work in the supporting streaming video. We do content moderation, all those kind of functions that can be outsourced and done less expensively and lower labor cost or markets. We do that and with, again, special emphasis on connected devices, and so that's kind of what brings us here.
Great, thank you, Judd. Next, I'd like to introduce Melissa De La Rama, VP of Distribution at Warner Media. Melissa, thanks for being here today. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your role at Warner Media?
Thank you, definitely. So at Warner Media, I'm responsible for growing subscription sales, app engagement, and transactional revenue for HBO Max, HBO, Cinemax, Warner Brothers, and Turner Networks across global platforms, including Apple, Sony, Microsoft, and Samsung. You can see all the great brands that I support, and then also all of the platforms that my sales and distribution team distributes through as well. So we do a lot of the things that I'll be talking about is really from a partner management perspective through this panel.
Great, thank you, Melissa. We also have with us today, oops, skip past. Arsham Hanabeki, sorry, technical difficulties, SVP of Product and Technology at Universal Electronics. Thank you for joining us, Arsham. Tell us a bit about yourself and what you do at Universal Electronics.
Thank you, Paul, for having me. So I've been an engineer for many years now, building as a peer engineer initially, then now more on the product side, mixed with technology, on hardware and software across everything from entertainment, home security, and smart home applications. Now, specifically on the home entertainment side, our company is really focused on two primary parts. One, the smart TV market, and second, the pay TV market, which is really the company where the company started. So we work with both operators as well as smart TV platforms. So you can kind of imagine we see both sides of the market kind of evolving, and they're targeting the same end goal. We do everything from finished hardware products. One example, we've shipped well over 100 million voice remotes. We actually were awarded a technology Emmy Award with Comcast and Apple for that introduction back in 2017. And we do our software that helps the experience and entertainment control across devices, and we're live on well over 500 million devices now. So we see a lot of good things happening in this market, and look forward to a good conversation.
Great. Thank you, Arsham. Next up, we've got Lexi Nauer, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Brightcove. Hi, Lexi. Tell us a bit about yourself and your role at Brightcove.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I'm Lexi Nauer, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Brightcove. I'm responsible for the go-to-market strategy and execution for Brightcove's media products. Brightcove is an online video platform. We help media companies manage, distribute, and monetize their content. And if you take a peek at that slide, that's just a few of the fabulous brands that we proudly support. And we do so all the way from cloud-based Emmy award-winning transcoding all the way to OTT app development and distribution. And for the purposes of today's conversation, I'll be providing commentary through the lens of an OTT app developer. And I'm thrilled to do it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lexi. Next, we have our fifth and final member of the panel, Nick Lamb, who's Vice President of Business Development and Strategy at Viacom CBS Streaming. Nick, tell us a bit about yourself and what you do at Viacom CBS.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here. So spent the last 10 or 15 years in media and telecom, focusing on strategy and business development, helping build businesses, and now currently help lead strategy efforts for Viacom CBS Streaming. So focusing on Pluto, Paramount Plus, and the broad variety of streaming FAST, SVOD, and AVOD services within our portfolio. So excited to be here and talk to you all.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you all for joining us today. We're happy to have you, and I'm going to dive right into it and ask a question that's relevant today to video services and device manufacturers in today's crowded, competitive video consumption market, and that is, what are the experience qualities or elements that are most important to either enforce or deliver or make sure that they're there on a streaming video device, such as a smart TV, streaming media player, etc., or connected device in general, that makes services stickier, of higher value, or more likely to satisfy the video consumer, the user. And for this one, I'm going to go to Nick, Lexi, Arsham, and Judd. So, Nick, what's your view on this question?
You know, it's a great question, and when we think about things that make the product stickier, I think the first is just sort of delivering on the sort of table stakes customer expectations, right? Ensuring that the product works and it really meets customers where they are, right? I think we all sort of have a pretty well-established baseline of what that looks like. And so I think ensuring that we deliver on that is step number one. And then I think when we think more one level deeper, for us, it's about, thinking about content and really emphasizing our brand. So at Viacom CBS, our broad variety of brands are, I think, what really define us. And so emphasizing that we have those brands, that it's easy for them to discover, and that they're readily available. So for Pluto TV, for instance, we have such a broad variety of content, but it's not just volume of content, and it's not just delivered live linear, it's on VOD as well, and it's also of high quality. And so the ability to do all of those things, I think for us, has really shown to be of great meaning and success in driving the stickiness of our products.
Thank you, Nick. And next, Lexi, what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, I'm so relieved to hear Nick say this. I thought this was going to be a controversial point of view, but I guess not. So I think services really need to focus on addressing a hierarchy of needs when delivering a streaming experience. So starting with that baseline foundation, which is the content, right? Content's king, queen. If you have exclusive premium content, that will attract an audience. But from there, you need to be able to deliver that high quality experience and distribute that content across every device that could potentially yield a viewer. And you need to be able to do that in a reliable, secure, so you don't have password sharing, scalable, and consistent way. And as an industry, I don't think we're quite there yet. I would challenge that we're kind of I'd equate it to the early ages of internet browsing, right? And you'll know exactly how old I am when I give this example, but I would wait forever on broadband to watch my TRL music video recap. And now I have the same tolerance for that as every other internet browser. I will abandon that page in 3 seconds. And I think we'll start to see those expectations creep into the OTT streaming world. So coming back to our hierarchy of needs, once we've addressed quality content, quality experience, then I think we can kind of tap into those shiny, exciting UX features like voice control on smart devices or offline download for mobile and low bandwidth viewing, or maybe even tap into the really fun stuff like experimenting with interactivity and co-viewing in a web environment. But in sum, let's kind of cover the bases first before getting too excited on those shiny features.
Yeah, and I think you bring up some important things there, Lexi, which not to be reductive in life terms, but a lot of times some of our major problems are simple, but sometimes it's the simple and fundamental things that are hard, right? And I think for this market, it's really narrowing down and concentrating on those fundamentals that I think sometimes is difficult because there's multi-dimensional problems here, especially with so much content from so many people, all vying for the customer's attention, and then consumers faced with so many different choices in streaming services, and it's so easy to leave a service and then subscribe to another one. Services are very, very attentive right now to the issue of retention, getting people to stick, getting people to really like that experience. And I think that, as I alluded to in my initial introduction to the topic, I think certain fundamental experience elements are going to be key because they're things that people can appreciate across platforms, right? You don't need to bring the user along with something like voice. You don't need to explain how the technology works, but certain fundamental things like speed, like snappiness of the interface, or how quickly things begin to play and how little they buffer, how quickly they can navigate to the things that are most relevant to them within the user interface. So I think, these are things that are universal, no matter what device you're watching it on, the user can experience it. So I think fundamentals are important. But before I go off too much in that subject, let's actually kick this question to Arsham, how to make it from universal. What's your view on this?
Absolutely agree on the table stakes. So that as a starting point definitely is the necessity. Now, in the long run, there are different goals and visions depending on the platform and the player. In reality, we don't really look at device manufacturers as manufacturers anymore. Majority of them have evolved into quote unquote ecosystem owners, platform owners, and they actually maintain and expand a content catalog and app ecosystem, and even get into the business of licensing their operating system to other manufacturers. If you look at WebOS, Tizen, Android, that's how we really look at them as ecosystems that really bring together the whole experience. And they try to break down the walled gardens around the apps and provide that continuity in the experiences. So it really depends how you want to fit inside these ecosystems. Do you want to be the input zero? Do you want to be where the user starts their TV viewing experience? Or do you want to blend into an existing experience? And that kind of defines quite a few decisions that you need to make as the first step of defining your product and your streaming service. So we can get more into that, but generally speaking, we're seeing device manufacturers become a service provider that actually don't really make that much money on the chassis, on the TV or the hardware. They actually defer majority of their revenue to the ongoing basis, year-on-year monetization per year per install base. So they're evolving as far as how they look at their install base today, and the relationships are changing.
Yeah, I agree, and you see so much of that going on where they're looking now at that device, that smart TV, that's a streaming media player as a point of aggregation, right? And less so as well. We have a bunch of apps. We have a app store on here. We carry these streaming apps. Now they're looking at it as a point of experience within which you can consume all of this content. So that's a good point to bring up. Judd Bagley, what's your view on this question?
I don't think I could say it too much better than Pierre said it toward the end of his segment just now. He said it very eloquently that successful setup and education are really keys to stickiness. And I can actually illustrate that with the story. So again, Everrise provides premium outsourced support to connected device makers and we took on a client at one point that had a very, very interesting bit of hardware that would coordinate all your different connected devices, and then you could use voice commands to their remote, and you could control them that way. Very, very interesting. But one of the things we found is that when it comes to setting this stuff up, like those of us that are in this world, we know the difference between HDMI and DisplayPort, or RCA, or the difference between a jack or a plug. This was difficult for a large portion of their users. But one of the things we noticed was that certain of our agents were having much higher CSAT scores, much lower callback rates. Their customers would use the product more. They were much more likely to stick with it, and most importantly, they were much more likely to become promoters over time. And after some checking, one of the things we figured out is what set those agents apart is they were asking the people that they were providing support to, they'd say, look, maybe this would be easier if you just sent me a picture of the back of your set. That way they'd immediately know what version they were using. It was much easier for them to say, put this plug here, put this cable here. And it turned out to be a very, very powerful approach to training. So we expanded it, we productized it, we incorporated video, and we also expanded it to include training. So it wasn't just support, it was also training. So people would get everything set up correctly the first time, and they were much more likely to use it to its full extent, and they were much more likely to be happy with it, promote, and then become promoters. So that's really vital, and it's challenging because not many support operations are kind of set up to do that kind of work. But whereas that's all we do, it makes it easy when you outsource it. But so anyway, to summarize, like Pierre said earlier, training and complete setup the first time are really vital to making your product sticky.
Yeah, that's good issues to touch on, because I think for a lot of us, we forget that for many consumers, they buy a new product while there's that gap in between getting it home from the store and finally starting to watch something, right? And so for those of us that are not as technically savvy, some of these things we take for granted can be confusing. The differences between HDMI ports, HDMI ARC, how really to get everything working right, to set up their Wi-Fi. I think removing those points of friction helps get people to the point in which they can enjoy watching content faster. And I think that's an intangible sometimes that it's so.
And another thing we noticed was another thing we noticed is when people are able to get things set up and use it to its full capacity, their friends come over and they become impressed, and that necessarily sparks a conversation, which can lead to opportunities to sell them as well. Whereas if you have a smart remote, for example, and its use is no different from the remote that came in the box, as Pierre was saying, that's that kind of conversation that's not going to happen. So that's an opportunity that's lost.
Right. Agreed. The next question that I had for our panel is, we're going to switch directions here and look at, let's say, the subscription side of the equation, because often, people don't just watch content on their devices. They often, see a new service they haven't tried before and they want to sign up for it. So what are effective ways to drive signups and subscriptions for content services across devices that are out there? Is it placing, an advertisement, or placing that new service somewhere within the interface? Is it co-promoting with the device maker to make this happen? Is it online campaigns with the device owners? I mean, how do you accomplish this, really driving signups and subscriptions on a device? And for this one, I'm going to go to Melissa, Lexi, Judd, and Nick. So Melissa, what's your view on this one?
So my team's focus is to drive signups and subscriber revenue, and most of our day-to-day is spent really figuring out, how are we going to do that on our platform partners. And so I think the first step is really what we do is we ensure the organic discoverability and browsability is there. We make sure that the reg flow is great, that these organic methods of app discoverability like search and the app product pages are optimized. And so that's really, what we focus on with the platform partners first, base level. Then it's really the bread and butter, and the way that we, really focus on working with the platforms is to get those editorial placements and the paid media placements as well, and ensure that consumers can see, the value proposition that we have for our apps on the platforms. And then really beyond that, what we do is we work with those partners to amplify that support. And so some of the things that you mentioned in terms of, can we work on inserts in boxes, offers, beyond high impact merchandising, can we, and increase duration of support, can we also, find ways that we can do content exclusives and other things that that will make the platform partner want to step out with us to have that, that tap into culture moment that Michael was talking about a little bit with Paramount Plus. So we also on the HBO Max side look to make sure that our partners can tap into that and that we can work with them to show off some of the tech enhancements they have, some of the ways that their platform can highlight the content that we have on HBO Max that is specific to that platform. So that's a lot of what we do in terms of partner management.
Thanks, Melissa. Lexi, how would you like to weigh in on this topic?
Yeah, I'm first of all, I love this topic. This is one I'm like obsessed with right now, is user acquisition. I think it's so important because you can have the greatest content in the world, but it's meaningless if you can't attract an audience to that content. And I think it's all about creating engagement along the entire user journey. So beyond that setup and leaning on your device partners for that. When you think about initial device setup, you think about I have a remote right here, having the little click buttons with going straight to view that app, or having the apps pre-installed, but those are only accessible to the Warner Medias and the Viacoms of the world. If you're operating on a more limited budget, the easiest thing you can do, like Melissa said, is search and discovery. And on one of the highest viewed platforms, as we learned earlier in your presentation, Roku, only 10% of apps are indexed and searchable. So that's such a missed opportunity. And then beyond that, I think rethinking the types of promotional channels that you use, and you kind of alluded to this in the question, is rather than maybe doing a 30-second commercial spot on a linear TV and getting them to your OTT viewing platform, maybe experiment with in-app opportunities. Like Roku has a great self-service platform where you can advertise and do display ads. Or our customer Reverie really does this well. They lean into seasonality and their partnership with Apple. They did a bunch of organic promotion during Pride Month. They were App of the Month. So really leveraging your device partnerships throughout that entire user journey is very important to driving subscribership.
Thanks, Lexi. I think, Judd, I'd like to hear your opinion on this one.
So, I look at this from the standpoint of again, user support. We've had a lot of success in training inbound sales agents in being inbound support pre-sales agents. Let me be clear, in being skilled at actually selling the product. So most products have an 800 number, whatever you can call, if you want to get information ahead of time about the product, compatibility, etc. We find that that's a really good opportunity to turn customer support from a cost center to a revenue center. And the way you do that is by training your agents in the soft sale, essentially. And it has to be very soft sell at that stage in the buyer's journey. But if you can do that, if you can help them not only answer those questions, but also make very useful product suggestions, we find that they are quite quick to convert if it's done correctly. And the way to ensure it's done correctly is to not only incentivize the agents in terms of just sales, but it has to be a combination of sales and empathy score. And if you can do that, if the caller comes away feeling like this person really wanted to solve my problem, then we've had a lot of success in generating sales and subscriptions that way. So the challenge with that, it's a talent acquisition challenge, because typically the subject matter experts that are doing that kind of work, they don't tend to be equipped with the soft skills needed to make it that really kind of pleasant, overbearing sales experience. So it takes a little work finding the right people to do it. But when you can, and when you incentivize them correctly, then again, turning support from a cost center to a source of revenue can be very, very powerful. And I'm sure your CFO will find that very interesting as well.
Thank you, Judd. I think the three of you so far have touched on something that probably should be mentioned. So Melissa, Lexi, and Judd, that that customer journey is multidimensional, right? And so there's a lot of different ways to tackle that to finally convert that person into subscribership. So with that, I think, Nick, what's your view on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I would reiterate a lot of the same comments that folks have said, and Melissa mentioned Mike's comments earlier on from the earlier interview, and he and I obviously same company, and we're speaking the same language there. So I think the only thing that I would sort of add to that is, at least from a Viacom CBS perspective, we sort of think about customer acquisition on an ecosystem basis, right? And so we're going to use the assets that we have in order to drive signups and meet people where they are, regardless of whether or not they're in an SVOD or are using our SVOD platform today. So we're going to find them on our linear broadcast channels. We're going to find them on Pluto. We're going to find them on our other ad-supported and subscription services, BET Plus and Noggin and CBSN, et cetera. And so I think for us, it's really as a result, I think it creates this really great opportunity for us to identify kind of shared viewing experiences. So we may not find someone in a certain place, but we may find someone that in the same household that's going to be accessing and using a Viacom CBS product and try and bring them in that way. So I think everybody has to use the tools and resources at their disposal, and our ecosystem of products and services is really one of the ways that we try and do that.
Thanks, Nick. And I think utilizing the ecosystem that each party has, regardless of what they might do, I think is key really to getting the most out of driving subscribership and signups, whether that's leveraging a hardware ecosystem, a content ecosystem, or services ecosystem. I think it's essential. So for this next question I have, I'm going to go to Judd, Melissa, Nick, and Arsham for this one. Judd, now we all see smart TVs getting strong traction with consumers. Are there specific parts of the smart TV experience that you see as fundamental to why that traction is getting stronger? And how can content owners, streaming services, and device manufacturers really take advantage of it?
Let me start by saying Everrise, in conjunction with Parks, recently completed we've published a white paper with a lot of really interesting new research into precisely this topic. And it'll be available on the Parks website and at Everrise soon. People should check this out. But among the revelations that were included in that, one of them kind of speaks directly to what we're discussing. We found that 75% of boomer and older, so the boomer generation, the greatest generation, when they stream video, it's 75% of the time it's consumed on a mobile device. And the balance, the remaining 25%, is split between computer and a smart TV. Whereas with millennials and Gen Z, they tend to split that up roughly evenly. It's a third, and a third. That the senior number is very interesting because this means that they're overwhelmingly opting for the platform that has the fewest moving parts. The mobile experience is bulletproof, where you bring a smart TV into the mix, and then you again start dealing with cables and hubs and all that. And so they're intimidated by that. And then there's another bit of data that even makes it slightly more interesting, and that is the fact that among boomers and older who do own smart TVs, 60% of the time roughly, they're using it to watch live TV, as opposed to 10% for the younger generations. So that's interesting, because that represents a pretty compelling opportunity, I think, to gain market share, because helping these demographics take full advantage of this hardware they have, which is so powerful, they don't even know what they're dealing with. But one of the reasons we also find that this traction has really picked up recently is among, again, the older generation, is they were the ones that were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. They had to spend the most time home. They were the ones whose subscribership to these streaming video services grew the most during the past 18 months. And what's even more interesting about that is the fact that while they tend to have fewer subscriptions, they will subscribe for much longer periods and are much less likely to churn. So if that's something you're trying to combat, you need to look to that group and try to figure out a way how to sell into that market, because they will stick with you if you can get over that barrier of successful setup and teaching them how to successfully use their hardware.
Thanks, Jed. Yeah, that was very interesting to hear about how that particular segment, how things have changed for them because of the pandemic and the kind of opportunity that they present. Melissa, what are your views on this? Why smart TVs are getting traction with consumers and how to take advantage of it?
Yeah, I think the research that Jed just shared is so fascinating. I hadn't heard a lot of that. In terms of just general smart TV, I mean, I think the big trend here is obviously the decrease in pricing for the smart TVs, and the fact that you can get these amazing features, a 60-inch display, 4K resolution, things that were so expensive previously for $500 to $1,000, or sometimes even less, quite a bit less sometimes. So that's one of the trends we're seeing in the marketplace, right? This proliferation of these internet connected TVs. And then what's interesting as well is, especially during the pandemic, what we saw was the fact that, a lot of folks were putting more money into these big home theater systems, and the real growth or the increased purchases of those high-end advanced TVs, the 70-inch and above, the 8K, the OLED. And so that's a really interesting dynamic, but both of those mean that there's a proliferation of televisions. I mean, it's not a surprise to us. We've seen all the earnings reports that all the TV manufacturers have been just shipping a lot of TVs, and that was been a great opportunity for us. From a content provider focus, Warner Media has always, placed a high value on partners that have these deep living room relationships and these smart TV manufacturers. They have historically, the subscribers through them have historically had higher retention rates. It makes sense. You're paying for a much larger purchase right off the bat. You're setting it up on your main living room screen, or and so you do tend to keep that subscription longer. And because of that, the experience that consumers have on that smart TV is really kind of the best feature set in terms of display and such. So we do try and highlight a lot of those features that our smart TV partners have as kind of the feature benefits.
Yeah, I think you bring up some good aspects there, especially as you mentioned, pricing is very competitive now. Screen sizes for price, it's a very competitive point now. So you have a lot of manufacturers, especially the major ones, looking at ways to differentiate, and some of those come, in some of the typical performance aspects, right, display technology and so forth. But you see now more of it branching out into ways to better leverage audio, HDR, Dolby Vision, what have you, Atmos, to enhance that experience both visually and audibly, the right descriptor there. And you see innovation when it comes to delivering that total experience on progressively bigger screens. And I think for the service side, or for the content is always going to be the content, but for the service provider side, or the video service side, really showing people what's possible on that investment that they've made, I think is a way to get them locked in and to really increase their engagement. Next person, Nick Land, what's your view on this topic?
Yeah, I think we're all pretty much on the same page here. I think a lot of it comes down to, accessibility of devices from a price perspective. I think that's a sort of, a pretty apparent one from a market perspective. UI, UX improvements over the years have grown by leaps and bounds and made it so much easier for folks to find content, access content, and then add new content to the extent that they want to. And frankly, it's just simplicity, right? I think there's something really elegant about turning on your TV and just having everything there. It goes back to that sort of input one thing, right? It's just you turn it on and it's there. And I think that speaks to a bit of the resilience, frankly, of the pay TV business as well, right? I mean, there's something nice about one remote, not having to change or modify things. And so I think a little bit goes back to kind of what's old is new again. And you see that folks like and appreciate that simplicity. I mean, the anecdote from Pluto TV was always, we had two sort of comments about seeing a guide, right? Was one from older generations, which would say, wow, it's so nice to see a guide, a linear guide set up, and younger generations would say, wow, this is so inventive, and we're so excited by it because we've never seen a guide before. And so, I think with smart TVs, you're just seeing a sort of a natural progression to what people are most comfortable with, and providing them with that experience is both lean forward to the extent that they want, and lean back to the extent that that's what they want. So the ability to modify, meet customers where they are, and provide them with that simplicity, I think is seen in the growth trajectory over the last few years.
Yeah, that's an interesting contrast between the perspective of older generations and newer generations, and how they react to, genres of UX that I think we're so accustomed to, but perhaps we've gone away from it, and we've begun to revisit as well, depending on the type of content, and whether it's linear or streaming or what have you, and how that fits and how it needs to be seen from a choice perspective. And I think the person I want to ask next about this, someone who's involved with experience and smart TVs from a slightly different angle, Arsham from Universal. What's your perspective on why smart TVs are getting the kind of traction they are right now, and how the ecosystem can best take advantage of this?
So we're actually integrated on the top 3 most premium TV brands, and year on year, we're seeing the penetration of the smart TV features actually grow double digit, and it's actually picking up pace. So this in the long run, as Nick well put it, will be the starting point of all the TV experiences. I mean, we moved on from input 1 to input 0. Input 1 used to be your set-top box connected to the first HDMI, and you always turn on the system and it always starts there. But smart TVs, you actually have to cancel out of the smart TV dashboard now, and that will only grow over time. And as long as the UI UX experience is there, and the universal search is there, the automatic setup experience is there, and these are the things that year on year we're trying to improve on, so that you basically bring a device home, you turn it on, you plug everything in, and the content just shows up. It doesn't matter where the content is coming. If you have a blend of linear content from your set-top box with over-the-top content from the smart TV, from a user perspective, you should never have to think. And these are the challenges that we're trying to address, so that the user starts building a relationship with the quote-unquote operating system that's running on their TV that runs elsewhere. And this is not limited to entertainment, just so that we're clear. With the addition of home fitness applications or gaming applications or smart home automation, home security, basically just look at your backyard camera on your TV. These are the things that will train the users over time to trust this platform as a dashboard for their life. And entertainment is only a bullet in the life. And these are year-on-year features that are getting adopted and growing as far as penetration. So the depth is growing and the penetration is growing.
Thank you, Arsham. I want to cut away very quickly before we get into our Q&A portion to look at one of our audience polling questions that we put forth earlier. And the question we asked the audience was, what were the most important parts of the video consumption experience for video services and service providers to focus on across all of these different devices, across smart TVs, streaming media players, set-top boxes, and other connected video devices? And the choices were a unified look and feel across devices and platforms, maintaining a single playlist or favorites across devices and platforms, maintaining different playlists or favorites for each device, platform, the ability to download movies and episodes for later playback or offline playback. And the last choice was speed of navigation regardless of platform. And if we can get those results up here, we essentially had 3 answers that were equally chosen at 27% each. Unified look and feel across devices and platforms, maintaining a single personal playlist or favorites across all devices and platforms, and also tied was speed of navigation regardless of platform. So these 3 elements, overwhelmingly, our audience picked as the most important parts of the experience to preserve. And so that's unified look and feel, maintaining playlists and favorites across platforms, and speed. So how do each of you feel? Do you agree with these results? Are they surprising, or are they pretty expected?
They want it all, Paul. Everybody wants it all. You want it to be fast. You want all these nice shiny features. You want it to know exactly what you watched where across all the devices. I'm not surprised at all. I think your expectations are very high, and it validates our kind of the first question we opened with, what matters and what makes it stickier. So making sure you have the fundamentals covered so you're not trending on social media for crashing, very important. And then getting those really nice features like having a consistent playlist across the different devices will make it that much stickier when someone's choosing not only what to watch, but where, so they don't move on to another service.
Thank you. Anyone else have an opinion on that one? Or is it pretty much what you expect?
Yeah, it seems like we have to do all 3 at the same time.
Yeah.
Perfect. Flawless plan.
Make it fast, give us everything we want, and make it fast everywhere. And
exactly.
But that was a bit reductive. But I mean, I think from my perspective, these results are not necessarily surprising, because I think, although, for example, downloading movies for playback offline is a really great feature when you travel, I think what affects people's everyday experience and what's more tangible is certainly having that familiar experience, no matter where they're viewing your content from. And to me, at least personally, I think that the most important thing is usually going to be responsiveness, speed, and whether that's how fast it starts to play, or it's how fast I can navigate through the interface to get to what I want to play. To me, speed I would have thought was going to be the most important one, but as we can see, multiple fundamental dimensions there are important to people, and it kind of harkens back to what I mentioned when I first opened the topic today, that I think fundamentals are going to be what really grab people, no matter where they're watching the content, mobile device, traditional set-top box, streaming media player, what have you. So with that, I'd like to move to our audience Q&A portion, and we have a lot of audience questions on this topic. We'll try to get through a few of them before we run out of time. The first one that I want to put to the panel is, how does personalized advertising drive engagement among viewers, and what is the importance of fluid ad integration?
I'll chime in. Having personalized ads can increase watch time. The user is less likely to abandon if something's more relevant to them. Having personalized ads can also really increase CPMs for those who are providing the inventory. That they're much more likely to result in a conversion, and you're able. The beauty of digital in this environment of OTT is that there is so much potential in digital tracking and attribution. So I'd say it's a win-win, both for the content provider, for the end viewer, and for the advertiser. Maybe it'll result in a sale.
So definitely, and the concept of personalization, especially on devices, especially considering the changes in the cookie-less tracking, the reach across devices, measurement of reach across devices, and the issues that you'll have in executing that with privacy in mind, then increases the importance of a private implementation by what we call device manufacturers, really operating system owners in the long run. So it will shift some of the dynamics in and out of what can and is possible to do within an application, and will need a lot of, let's say, business innovation, not purely technological, but also collaboration across platform owners and the content providers. So there's a lot of things that in the next couple of years will look quite different than what they do today.
I think from a personalization perspective, personalization of customer experience and advertising is very important in general. Just that whole, making sure that it's something that people do want to see, experience, view. But I also, for the advertising piece, just wanted to mention quickly. So for HBO Max, we launched an ad-supported tier at the beginning of June. And I think for us, one of the major tenets of the strategy was really, how do we keep people within story? And how do we use the advertising in a complementary way and look at different types of ad units and really test all of those different ad units to see, how can we make the advertising be more impactful and yet at the same time less disruptive. So that's kind of, what we're constantly striving for, what the product strategy team on the ad side is constantly striving for and has communicated to me.
Yeah, and I think that's I think very tangible to a lot of people. Sometimes you have advertising which you notice because of the wrong reasons, right? Because it seems obstructive to your experience, or it seems annoying, and maybe it has nothing to do with whether it's relevant to your interests or not. It's more the fact that it comes across your user experience, or it pops up, where normally you use some part of that UX to navigate, what have you. So I think that's a good intangible factor to touch on, is where it's not necessarily impeding on the user experience, but you're still getting a good piece of that viewer eyeball within their experience, to where if it is something that's relevant, they notice it and they can act on it. The next question I wanted to, not to cut anyone off, but I wanted to get to a different question here that I think is going to be an interesting one. And it comes to budget and spend. How do companies decide where to spend their time and resources when it comes to different devices and access to content? Prioritization. How do companies decide?
I mean, I'm personally really excited to see the data that you presented at the beginning of this, Paul, in terms of the adoption of smart TVs, because a lot of our customers have to pick and choose today. Their money goes where the eyeballs are. And if they don't have a lot of penetration with their audience on smart TVs, they're not going to build a Samsung app. It just comes down to that. And then it's like a vicious cycle. Then no people buy Samsung TVs because it doesn't have all the apps they want. So seeing higher adoption of smart TVs is really encouraging. And I think that will kind of force prioritization for building apps on those platforms.
The white paper that I referenced, and I this might be where some of your data is coming from, does get into that in very interesting ways. It really divides stuff up by demographic, by life stage, and looks at what hardware is being used, what type of content's being used, and then you can take that information and triangulate it, and then look at lifetime value of customers, which is not addressed specifically in here, but it does talk about the idea that churn is much lower, again, among the older demographics. So you put all that together, and it seems to suggest that there's quite a bit of opportunity there, especially as lockdowns are apparently going to continue, and we're not all going to be free and clear as soon as we thought we were going to be.
And I think on my part, my view of this is that I was a bit intrigued / surprised when I saw the results of our surveys that I presented earlier, looking at how distinctly the usage by type of service differed by platform. And as I mentioned, service provider usage, in set-top boxes, not surprised by that. However, how differently streaming media players and smart TVs differed in terms of, or how much they differed in terms of SVOD and AVOD usage, particularly for streaming media players, that was surprising to me. So I think that insight like that is good for a company determining by type of content or type of service, how to prioritize what type of platforms they develop for. And I think that, in a perfect world, there's unlimited development budget, there's unlimited resources and headcount to devote towards being terrific on all platforms. But certainly, I think, especially today in such a competitive market and where costs are tight, the cost of content is going up. Services have to be intentional about where they're putting the most effort, about where they're making their experiences really, really shine. Which is not to say they should ignore other platforms, but certainly, if there's an area that's your strength, you need to make it differentiated. You need to make it a very strong strength and representation on said platform, whether your specialty is SVOD, AVOD, or online video. I'd like to go to our next question. And this one's pretty interesting, especially for those of us that have children or that have family across multiple generations. Do you think social media will get more and more integrated into the TV experience? And how important are the influencers in highlighting new content to consumers?
I think it's an interesting question. I think that one that's definitely evolving. I think today, it still remains something that is largely promotional in nature. I think, at least from the content distributor perspective. But I think increasingly you're seeing experiments with certain shows where there's an overlap in audience and certain sort of attempts to be opportunistic, I think, where it makes logical sense to do that. And so I think you're going to see some very logical but sort of intentional steps to address social media and content consumption so that you're really, again, meeting customers where they are. And to the extent that social media has continued to remain a sticky source of video content, that's something where we continue to need to evolve and find new avenues beyond just swipe to subscribe or things like that. I think there's and promotional content, I think, is just sort of the initial step, but it's going to go significantly beyond that, I think, in the coming years.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, to add on to that, Bright Cove actually works directly with ITV under the Viacom family. And if any Love Island fans out there, I think they've done a really great job of integrating social media into the content. So having polls throughout the experience, and also they've done a great job of facilitating e-commerce. Like, people see them walk around with their little water bottles on the show, and then you can drive to a purchase through social media. So really leaning into that second screen and experience. I've been really impressed with, as Nick said, kind of making it a more native experience and less forced. So I'm excited to see what else happens.
Yeah, and I think it's always important to remember, how frequently people are using a second screen of some sort, whether it's a laptop or a mobile device, as they watch. And sometimes, if you want to say it's short attention span, they're doing two things at once, or maybe they are searching on that actor, that product, that reference, that song. That I think the industry continues to have an opportunity there if they can figure out a non-obstructive way to leverage that device that probably somebody has within arm's reach to purchase, to inquire about that thing they see on screen. Because I think, a number of companies have tried in the past, like whether it's Red Button or what have you, to do interactive TV, right? And we've seen that have, shall we say, varying success with getting that to work. But I think the dynamic of it now is actually more dependent on that other influence, whether that's social media or references on screen, or finding ways to really get people to invest in the experience on their other device that they have at hand. I think more or less that's our implementation of the concept of interactive TV of old, right, from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, where you have the best device that somebody can click through to buy a product right there, a phone, laptop, what have you. And I think that there's a lot of room there still for the industry to innovate in a way that consumers really get into. So I'd like to close our Q&A section with one last question. We might run a couple minutes over here, but I think it's an important one to get to because it touches on kind of a macro subject for the sector that I touched on earlier, and that's going to be increasingly important as time goes on, which is aggregation and perhaps super aggregation. And so the question was, do you think there will continue to be hundreds and hundreds of services available to consumers? Or is the bundle, again, once more inevitable, and are we just seeing another retake of the cable bundle, but now through OTT services? The pipe has changed, but it's still another monolithic bundle. Do you think there's going to be a return to that?
So we can say from the platform side,
yeah,
we do see aggregation as key. And with aggregation comes subscription management, identity management across devices, and a lot of targeting opportunities, personalization opportunities under the protection of identity management. So we actually see that get reinforced by a lot of macro movement, geopolitical movements, both in Europe and US, actually. But purely the fact that content is now peer targeted allows both an opportunity and a risk of building something similar to social bubbles that we ended up generating with social networks. We are ending up with more niche content providers that can reach their user base that traditionally they could not on live TV, linear TV platforms. So the content options are going to continue growing, but we do see the movement towards single subscription management as a strong trend. So if with that comes aggregation and universal search across content sources, then yes, we probably see a strong possibility for that.
Yeah, I'll chime in. I feel like 5 years ago when you're attending conferences like this in person, everyone was so obsessed with the skinny bundle. It's coming back. It'll be an OTT. And I think it's just taken a different form than we expected. I would argue that fast channels are the modern skinny bundle. You're getting all these aggregated views of channels. Or even I love what Michael said this morning about building your own bundle. When you have more than 4 subscriptions, you're kind of choosing what you want to watch. I do hope that gets slightly more consolidated, and especially when it comes to like sports rights, I think we're still very fragmented as an ecosystem. But yeah, I think bundling's already happened. It just looks a little different than we thought it would.
Yeah, agreed. And I think for many consumers, what is the bundle today, right? That's a good rhetorical question. And for many consumers, it's having multiple services, but if they're lucky enough, if they have a new enough device, some of that aggregation takes place in the interface, right on the platform. But I think for the bigger picture, when we look at what that question from the audience was asking, are we seeing a return to just another giant bundle just delivered over the internet? I think it will be different, because I think certainly I would agree, that people now are overwhelmed by choice. Too much content, too many services, or eventually they will be. And then, okay, super aggregation takes place. Do people really want, another pummeling every month, right? A $120 bill for 50% of channels that they don't watch. But I don't think we'll get to that. Now, even if, notwithstanding the price gap between vMVPD services, if you will, and traditional pay TV is starting to narrow, right? Because the cost of content keeps going up. And some of these service prices keep going up, whether that's YouTube TV, Fubo TV, Netflix and Live TV, what have you. I'd like to bring in a bit of a tangential example that's important here, which is that if we think about taxis and ride shares, right? And so you have people that are fully aware that a taxi could be substantially cheaper, right, to take at a certain hour of the day, or when things are very, very popular, sports game, or it's late at night. You have people that are fully aware that it probably costs a third or a fourth to take a taxi, but they still opt to take an Uber, Lyft, what have you. And why is that, right? It would seem nonsensical on the surface, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that the experience is so much better, right? And they get a lot of the elements that they really need in that particular use case that they want at that time, right? Whether that's an ETA, seeing where their driver is, knowing how much it's going to cost. Those things aren't intangibles anymore. And if I bring it back now to the video experience and, having lots of content available, so many subscriptions, so many channels, I think with the technologies that we have today in use on the platforms we have and the options that are available to deliver an experience to the consumer, yes, the consumer may not have, the $20 skinny bundle option, may not have as many of them as they did before, a couple of years ago. But I think that with the enhancements that we've seen to the experience, you're going to see less of a case of people being presented with content that they don't want, that's not relevant to them, and it's presented in a way that's cumbersome for them to get to or navigate to. So I think the experience is really essential in making that prospect not realistic, right? This big cumbersome bundle full of things you don't want to watch. I don't think that's going to happen again. So I would agree that, yes, we're seeing a return to aggregation, but I would disagree that it's going to be received the same way that it's been received in the past because of the enhancements that have taken place in the experience, right? And some of those things can only take place over streaming services, right? Or some of these hybrid propositions, for example, 3SS spoke to it earlier, where we're melding together traditional linear video and streaming services into this new experience. So again, to rehash my point, I think the user experience has a lot of potential to change the way in which people consume video and even how receptive they are to paying for more and more expensive bundles. It's going to fundamentally change the aspects of that, how it's received, and people's willingness to pay for those bundles. So unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I'd like to thank everyone again for joining us today and giving us some really great perspective on this intersection of devices, interfaces, and user experience. And if we didn't get to your questions, those of you in the audience, feel free to join us in a few minutes for our networking discussion, which I'd like to invite our speakers today, if they can, to join us as well after we conclude here in a minute, and to join in on the discussion around experiences and connected devices. So I'd like to thank all of you again for being here. We're honored you could join us today and give us some really insightful perspective on this intertwined nature of connected devices in the video experience. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you in a few minutes in our networking discussion. Take care. Now, let's get to the next slide. So we'd like to thank those of you in the audience for attending. We invite you all to join us in a few of our speakers in a networking discussion coming up next via Zoom Rooms. You should have the link there in SwapCard and to be able to click and join that networking discussion. Coming up next in the Future Video series, we hope you'll join us here again on October 6th for our look at the impact of 5G on consumer entertainment. Don't forget our upcoming events later this year. Along with the aforementioned session on October 6th, we will close out the year with 2 content-filled back-to-back days of great sessions, the shift to hybrid business models, and the age of video aggregation on December 14th. And on the 15th, thanks to our sponsor Delta Tray, we bring you Capturing the Consumer with Video Engagement Strategies and OTT Bundling Partnerships. As a reminder, if you're interested in following the ins and outs of the OTT market in today's fast streaming environment, be sure to check out Parks Associates OTT Video Market Tracker, which gives monthly updates on the OTT market. I'd also like to mention that if you enjoyed today's session and you're interested in sponsorship opportunities for upcoming future video sessions, please reach out to Elizabeth Capice, our strategic account manager, who would be happy to discuss those possibilities in detail. Please also remember to reach out to Jason Paris or anyone else on our great sales team at Parks Associates if you're interested in research on OTT, connected devices, or any of the other research within the other areas we cover across streaming video, pay TV, consumer electronics, connectivity, digital media, and the smart home. Thank you again to everyone. We hope to see you in the Zoom Rooms discussion next or our next event on October 6th. Take care.
On behalf of everyone at Parks Associates, it is our collective goal to ensure that our sponsors receive the multiple benefits of sponsoring our executive conferences, custom webinars, and custom white papers. By participating in our events and custom marketing, you can expect extensive media outreach, ongoing press releases, lead generation, industry visibility, and brand awareness, all while leveraging our industry knowledge and insights, which have been carefully and strategically curated over 35 years. Our event sponsorships include visibility across the year, with options that include a short video interview that highlight your company's position in the market, produced and distributed by Parks Associates and shared across our virtual event platform and social media channels. Additionally, sponsors can access this video content for their own use to send to prospects or use as marketing collateral. Throughout the year, we help connect you with the people that matter the most. Our research partner sponsorship provides the highest level of visibility and includes a white paper developed and written by our analyst team in collaboration with your team. This sponsorship level includes 3 months of marketing content, including lead generation activities. Parks Associates Custom Marketing Services offer a white paper or webinar on its own apart from our event sponsorships. These thoughtfully crafted content projects leverage our consumer and industry data. These projects are highlighted by our marketing and research team for 3 months. Our team is dedicated to sharing the latest customer and industry research to help educate the industries we serve. Our marketing services and event sponsorships helps to position our sponsors to ensure maximum exposure and reach to our executive level audience. We do this through a variety of channels and formats, including video, social media, podcasting, blogging, press activities, and much more. In 2022, we will continue to offer our virtual events in addition to our in-person events, offering a great mix of options to participate. If you are interested in getting involved with Parks Associates events or custom marketing options, please reach out to me or any of the Parks Associates team members. We look forward to working with you.